Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet.
Welcome to episode 65 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Dr Keivan Zokaei back on the episode to talk with us today about one of the best books I've ever read. It is a book that showed the clear win-win between my two passions, business and environmental improvement. Creating a Lean and Green Business System, written by Keivan, is a book truly about creating a better future with many compelling case studies. Let's get into the episode. Keivan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning to you, Brad. Thank you for having me back. It's a real pleasure.
Such a pleasure, mate. You know, I've been so passionate about that book that you wrote with your co-authors many years ago, and it's such a pleasure to be talking to you about it today. Keivan, what came first for you? Was it lean or environmental improvement? Like, what kicked it off for you?
So here's the story. I went to do a master's degree in the UK at Warwick University. And my background was oil and gas engineering. So far from green, if you like, or environmental improvement. So, but of course, I always personally was very, very interested on a personal level in green, if you like, in the whole green movement. And for my dissertation, for my master's degree, I needed to pick a subject. So I was torn between strategy, which is a consulting I do today, and I have always been passionate about, and doing something between lean and green, the cross between lean and green. So my professor at the time was suggesting to cross the two. So frankly, I don't even know which one came first, but I know that between strategy and lean and green, I chose lean and green. I knew that if I did strategy, probably I would be looking at a career in, say, strategy houses, big consultancies, and the usual career that you would take. But after you do a business degree, I decided that I will do something that is closer to heart. And I have never regretted it since, I have to say. So follow your heart, I guess. Yeah. And that dissertation actually is interesting. That led to a conversation with Jim Womack via email and via chat. And I was interviewing him for my dissertation amongst other people. What's funny, Jim Womack thought at the time that lean and green aren't necessarily reinforcing each other, although they're both about reducing waste and it's so obvious. He wasn't so sure, and he suggested I talk to his co-author Dan Jones, and the rest is history, because I ended up working for Dan Jones, and here I am 20 years on, and I'm still working in lean and green.
Wow. Yeah, well, it's great. And that lecturer that prompted you to look at it in that regard, that was an amazing step. When did you actually connect the two then? Like, when was it that you went, yes, there's a synergy. There's a clear win-win between, driving productivity and improvement using lean and capabilities there, as well as environmental?
So I think naivete is a bliss. When I first was doing my master's course and going on the modules and listening to the lectures as a young engineer, and they were talking about lean, and it's about reduction of waste, and it sounded so obvious. This is year 2001. So basically 20 years ago. So just coming out of the 90s, which are the real early days of lean and green, of lean. And it sounded very obvious that, yes, what's so difficult then? This is the same thing as saving the environment. So I guess that level of naivete helped me to be so au fait with the cross between the two concepts.
Wow, that's cool. Sometimes, what's the saying? Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is the bliss. Yes,
because you were cutting new ground then. Like I know you were, because it was in your book, Creating a Lean and Green Business System, that I first went, wow, okay. Like you, I was always passionate about the environment and also business improvement.
Yes.
But, I guess in that early noughties, you were cutting new ground. Now, you ended up doing your work and you ended up working with some pretty big organizations like Marks and Spencer's is one of them and many others. Like, when did you get to put it into practice? And what did you start seeing when you did get to put it into practice?
So it was Peter Hines, in fact, who helped massively. And you've had Peter on, I know, on this podcast at least a couple of times.
Yeah.
And obviously a good friend of mine today. And so I, as I went to work for Dan and Peter ran the center at Cardiff together. And Peter was a big encouragement to do something with the cross between lean and environment. In fact, my first job was just that. But in practice, there was no funding for it. And there wasn't real industry interest in it. It was lots of talk, lots of rhetoric. As you said, that ignorance that helped me as a naive engineer to get into it. I hadn't realized that in practice, you're right, not many organizations were really doing it. I have to say, I'm sorry to say that even today, not enough organizations do it. So, year 2007, I remember we got in above his garage. Peter had a small office that was really, really cold in the thick of the winter. And we got in there with a few other colleagues. So we had to put layers on to keep ourselves warm. And I hope that he listens to this and he remembers, and he will also laugh like me about it, because we often laugh about that moment. And that was our Kaizen event to try to pull together some sort of toolkit. Very soon, we had an opportunity with Mars. Mars, being a $30 billion giant, they decided that they will experiment with it. Maybe one of the very first major organizations on Earth. And mid-2000s, then we had the opportunity to take this to Mars, and it started in China. Of all places, it wasn't any of the Western Europe or North America, Australian sites. It was actually Shanghai. And they had a simple problem. Sounded simple again. 16% over in terms of energy and water consumption. And the reason for it was that Mars had forecasted a huge increase in demand, as you do in developing countries like China. So they had built facilities that were a lot bigger than the production so per unit of production, obviously, they had too much consumption of utilities. Now, we had a week. So we started on a Monday morning, and with a group of brilliant engineers, a group of 21 brilliant engineers. And by Friday afternoon, I can't say I had done anything because it was them. They had saved, in fact, 16% of their site energy and 16% of the site water. And that's what we had focused on mainly, but using lean and green techniques. It wasn't obviously saved by then, but they had solved the problem for it, that they knew that within weeks, not even months, within weeks, everything was implemented. So when we followed up, and annualized benefits were 16% for both energy and water. That was a moment that we knew that this technique does work.
Yeah, you get the baseline of environmental gains at the same time as major economic gains.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And you look at it now, Keivan, where it's gone. Like you look at what Unilever's doing, Nestlé's doing, governments around the world, others who are just really driving that message. It's amazing. You must pinch yourself sometimes where you look how it's actually evolved, this continuous improvement approach to get both environmental and economic gains.
And I sometimes do. So people like yourself in Australia, Brian Hurley in the US, and there are the other colleagues around the world in Singapore and in Europe, everywhere, who are actively pursuing this. But that story, if I may take it one step forward, then so that by 2010, Mars had made it mandatory for all sites around the globe to do the same exercise. So we had given them the IP to what we had done, so they were allowed to use it. So they had made it mandatory for all sites around the world to do it at least once a year, with Linda Mars and those very high-powered people behind it because they cared about the environment. And in fast-moving consumer goods, you certainly had a movement like Nike, because Nike had learned their lessons by then, if you remember. And like as you said, like Unilever, Paul Polman, a great leader, as we all know, like Kimberly Clark, a lot of them in FMCG, they were doing that. A lot of the retailers like Walmart has certainly been trying a lot and achieving a lot. Tesco's at the time, I know that, Tesco's might have gotten into some economic problems in 2010s, but at the time they were very much into the lean and green movement. Now, Marks and Spencer, of course, was globally one of the leading brands in that domain. And they had the famous Plan A program. So because there is no Plan B for the planet. And so Peter and I got involved a bit. And literally what it was, it was a phone call that said, come and do this stuff, what to do. And again, maybe people who were in Plan A, a bit like a young engineer I was 10 years earlier, were a bit naive about it, thinking that if they did lean, of course they will save the environment as well. So they put a tiny seed funding, a very small amount of money into taking this to the whole supply chain. But we knew at that point that the techniques worked for a factory, for one production unit, if you like. We tried it several times, and every single time between 10 to 30% of the utilities were saved, which, as you say, made economic sense, more than enough, way more than enough to pay for the upfront investment of their engineering time and so on and so forth. But what we didn't know is that what about the end-to-end system? So if you go to the extended value stream, what happens then? And of course, Marks and Spencer, they don't make anything like any other retailer pretty much. They buy cheaply, if you like, and stack high, and they make a bit of profit on that. That's the retailing business model. And there wasn't anything different about the business model. So they just knew that they have to execute better in the supply chain. So we went to look at the end-to-end supply chain. Luckily, as it happened, that happened to be my own doctorate thesis, because I had done a part-time doctorate, being interested to take this. So we had a little bit of experience. We had, in fact, mapped by then 33 end-to-end FMCG chains at Lean Enterprise Center in Cardiff University. So we had a strong toolkit for the lean going into the extended value stream. And obviously, being interested in the green side, I tried to connect it and turn that into my doctorate thesis. So it was a heaven-sent gift, if you like, suddenly to put all of that into practice. Yeah. And I remember Peter and I were asking them, so what are your targets? Plan A people. And these are very visionary people who worked there at the time. And they said, what do you mean? Just do your stuff. Do we have to give you a target? Just do it. So they believed in it so much that it wasn't so much target driven. They were not saying save 5,000 tons of CO2. They were not saying save X tons of food waste. So we did. So we got involved with the end-to-end supply chain. And the very first chain that we mapped, it was a ready meal supply chain. So 50% of the food waste that existed in that very category was removed.
Wow.
1,000 tons of food waste, that was. There is a lot of food waste in food supply chains. We all know that. 15,000 tons of CO2. And just to put it into context, the annual target for all of Plan A, one of the leading programs on the planet, was only 60,000 for that year. Wow. So a quarter of it was saved. Costs were lowered by about 8%. Sales was uplifted by about 4%. Productivity increased by about 7%. And inventory was reduced by 25%, by a quarter. So
that's massive.
So you suddenly, I think that was a moment of truth for all of us. Some very senior retailers on the economic side. I remember presenting again a fairly young consultant engineer. And they had to ask me a few questions before I think they believed it. And then they realized, no, this is actually working. So naturally, Marks and Spencer turned it into a program, a very comprehensive program. So thousands of suppliers on the food side, not on the general merchandise. On the food side, thousands of suppliers went through a comprehensive program of lean and green. They introduced the scorecard that systematically introduced ethical, not just environmental, ethical, environmental, and economic. And economic was basically, they took our lean framework. SA Partners Lean Framework was the economic framework for M&S. It still is, by the way. And they published it, I think something like 3 or 4 months ago. So this is why I can openly talk about it. They publish everything. They made it open source. It's all there. Anybody, and I encourage anybody who is in FMCG, go and have a look what they've done. They have had some very tough time, except if it wasn't for the benefits they got out of this business framework that is ethical, environmental, and economic, and how they are so aligned. When you read it, economic and environmental and ethical, all the same thing. And they've been one of the leading retailers ethically and environmentally on the planet, as we all know. They managed to combine it with the economic framework.
Yeah, it's so good too that their journey is continuing, and it's so good that it's helped them through this tough time. Like, it's amazing. I saw that come out actually only a few months ago also, that report they put out. It's great that they're sharing it because it's certainly been successful. Keivan, that's amazing that the analysis of one value stream in a ready-made food line can get that sort of economic and environmental gain. It's massive.
It's been way beyond anything we imagined.
Yeah. And we all know that I think the concern for providing a planet for our future generation that's at least as good as we see now is high on most people's list. Like, it's right up there. Keivan, what would you recommend as the key steps for an organization to consider if they're going to go down a lean and green path? Like, number one I hear is you got to think the extended value stream. You got to think outside your walls in the broader perspective to get some big gains. But what are those steps that you'd recommend them to consider?
Brad, that is a fantastic question. I think it all boils down to people and culture. If you think about it, in all our organizations, all major organizations on the planet, we have an environmental team. We have the EHS team, Environmental Health and Safety, or you might call it the sustainability team. All companies on earth, there is that function. In parallel, we have the continuous improvement, you may call it enterprise excellence, lean, Six Sigma. So in parallel, there's another team of people who are working on improving the economics of the firm, and transformation team, and so on and so forth. Very, very few still combine the two efforts together. It's like having 2 improvement teams. And clearly, when you combine the two, something clicks. I think part of it is because people culturally get it. So people who are working in organizations, everybody cares about the children's future. It's important to have an economically healthy organization. But going back to what Simon Sinek said, it's the why. You give them the why, and you make it real. It's not just a glossy corporate report about sustainability. It's about improving the economics of the firm. And it's not just about saving money for the shareholders. It's about saving the future of the planet. When you bring these two together, then it's so powerful. And I think if I had one thing to say is that try to make it a cultural thing. Connect with the people. It's all about people.
What a great episode. We'll be taking a break from Christmas Day until the 10th of January 2022. We hope that you and your family and friends have a wonderful Christmas, and we welcome you back in the new year. There are some absolutely cracking episodes that you can go back and listen to on the break. Feel free to email me your favourite, and we can have a chat about the best ones of the season. Remember that you can go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to get hold of many resources that we and our guests have provided. It is becoming a useful library of tools and resources to help companies on an enterprise excellence journey. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. There's so many companies looking to create a purpose statement, trying to create their why, trying to generate that. And some of them fall flat. They do, and it doesn't connect. But I think with what I'm seeing out there, and especially in Australia, I can talk mainly from Australia, it's the number one, number two in most organizations. So connecting it into your purpose, it's a powerful thing. I don't think there's many generation of new workers coming through that aren't highly concerned and passionate about that either. So it's certainly a way to fuel positive energy rapidly, isn't it, what you're saying?
Absolutely. So the millennials, it's not good enough just to give them a salary anymore. They need to have that purpose. They need to know the why. I think Generation X and Generation Y need to learn quickly, very, very, very quickly, that this is how it works. You just can't ignore it anymore, as you just said.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Look, Keivan, I love how you mentioned that it brings that strong cultural piece into play and that big why element. But you mentioned something else too. Like I'm guessing, or I'm assuming from what you're saying, that bringing that resource of the economic people, the business improvement people, the quality people, even the safety people together and creating a unified energy in the company, that's got to be powerful when you combine knowledge and capability and bring the elements of lean into the elements of environment, the elements of environment into quality. Because ultimately it's the same thing, isn't it? It's we need to create continuous improvement to create a better future.
Absolutely. So you see, as you're saying, interestingly, it's ultimately all the same thing. I think I love your sentence, how you summarized it. Ultimately, they're all the same thing. And the point is, it's not one leads to the other. In fact, they're all the same thing, joint at the hip, if you like. It's a yin and yang harmony we're talking about. So you probably know, you do know this, that it's in the book as well. When Dan Jones and Gene Womack did their famous machine that changed the world study, they found something incredible. They found that improving quality rather counterintuitively gives you better economics. So up until that moment, the assumption was that if you want better quality, spends money on it, and a company spends money on it, and it costs you a lot more money, and therefore it's costly. Actually, Toyota comes along and proves that not only is no extra cost, in fact, it's cheaper. So good quality. Famously, Phil Crosby said quality is free. In fact, it's more than that. Quality is cheaper. Toyota proved the point. So they did a benchmark study. What we tried to do, Hunter, Peter, and I in that book tried to do, was to try to test the same hypothesis. Is environment also, so let's say green, because if you say environment is free, it might have the wrong connotation. Is going green is also free? And it turns out not only is free, but it's actually cheaper. So we repeated the very same exercise in the automotive sector using the same benchmark. We still know that Toyota is at the top of the quality league, Toyota and Lexus, of course. And we repeated the same exercise in the year 2012-13 when we were doing the research for the book. And it turns out that the greener they are, the more economic they are. The more economic they are, as in better quality and cheaper production, the greener they are. And Toyota was top of the league. Yeah. So the same benchmark. It's why? Because they're all the same thing. In fact, as part of the research for the book, I had to talk to Toyota and in Japan and senior directors who helped massively, I have to say. It's incredible how generous they are when they find that actually you're doing this for good research reasons. It's incredible how generous they are. So a senior director I was talking to said, well, obviously you don't use the word lean in Toyota, and said no. So what I didn't know is that actually in Japanese, there is a word for lean that they use. It's monozukuri. So I was interested. I asked the gentleman, so what is the meaning of monozukuri? And he said, it's about harmony. It's manufacturing in harmony. And I asked naively again, harmony in what? Between what and what? What harmony? And I realized after a few questions, because I don't think you understood my question, that it's probably lost in translation a little bit. Actually, it's not about being in harmony with anything. It's about the concept of harmony itself. It's about everything. It's yin and yang. they're all the same thing. So quality and environment are the same thing. Environment and quality and economics are the same thing. It's just doing the right thing. So this concept of monozukuri, which is the only or the nearest word for lean in Japanese, if you like. Now, by the way, this senior director told me that monozukuri is hitozukuri, and hitozukuri means creating people, making people. So monozukuri, the literal translation is making things or making artifacts, if you like. And but hitozukuri, the literal translation is making people. In other words, he was trying to explain that the manufacturing of artifacts is a consequence of creating the right people. And that's why Toyota, if you read the precepts, they totally have this purpose at heart. It's all about creating a sustainable transportation solution for people. So they don't care about giving you a car, they care about giving you a transportation solution. And that's what they are. And companies that are like Unilever, companies that manage to create that why for the people, they are very successful in hitozukuri, in creating good people, creating future generation senseis. And of course, those people get the concept of yin and yang and harmony, and they create environment, economy, and ethical in parallel, if you like. I hope some of that made some sense.
No, I love how you've combined it, Keivan, because what you're saying is that monozukuri, all about producing in harmony with people and the planet. Hitokuzuri is about developing the people so that they can do that. You're covering that cultural piece, but then also, I guess it's that results, that purpose, that why, that cultural piece, but then also that systematic piece, which is the win-win is there. That symbiotic relationship is there between it all. I was fortunate to be able to work with a company from Century Yuasa, and then one of their main strategic points was monozukuri. And I knew about it thanks to you. So thank you.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. I didn't know that story, Brad. That is incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it's starting to get out there, and I think, the word has so much beauty, doesn't it? In one word, there's so much beauty in it. I wish we could have more of that in our language.
Absolutely. And this is the beauty of Japanese as a language, as a culture, because it has the ability to capture monozukuri, hitozukuri, and the connection between these.
Yes, wonderful.
In fact, there is an interview with Mr. Fujio Cho, the previous president, the previous president of Toyota, who says monozukuri is hitozukuri. And I found that later, actually. So they openly talk about it.
That's nice.
And it's in the literature. Yes.
Keivan, with an organization that's going, okay, wow, this could be interesting. I can engage my people culturally to get economic and environmental outcomes, build a cultural continuous improvement to help the planet and help ourselves and help customers, and get that free outcome on environmental that actually saves you money, get that free outcome on quality that actually makes you, become more competitive. It's amazing. Where would you recommend they start? Like, what would your advice be?
So sometimes, maybe there are two ways to interpret your question, if I may clarify that. One way to, when I hear your question, one way to think about it is, where do I start? Do I start at the top? Is that what you mean? Is it from the top or anywhere you can start?
Both. Keivan, what about, would you, that would be great. Level of the organization, where do you need to start? But also then, what would you say people need to focus on first? What's some key elements they should do?
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's probably the second way to interpret. So if I may start with the first one, well, it doesn't matter whether you start at the top or the middle or at wherever you are. And that's the thing. The person at the top will need to believe in it and believe in themselves, more importantly, to understand that actually humans are capable of doing remarkable things. And by the same token, anyone else at any other level within the organization will need to have the same belief. And it's that moment that you know that you can believe in yourself and achieve a lot. And people will absolutely come and follow you because, like any other change, you just need to role model it. Talk less about it and do more, like any other cultural change that we know about, right? So just anywhere within the organization is my honest answer. And we have seen this. It's not always Paul Polman at the helm of Unilever who creates change. We have worked time and again with people who are on the shop floor. So a very small food company, we worked with them, and the person who was the instigator of all of this bonus recovery journey and lots of lean and green work happening was a shift leader on the floor. And this gentleman was doing remarkable, and obviously he had the respect of the very senior people. They didn't necessarily know exactly what he's doing, but they trusted him because his heart was in the right place. So my honest answer is anywhere, it doesn't matter. Now, but the second way to think about it, where do I start? As in, what's the first step? And I think the same thing. Start by believing in yourself. Going back to that positive psychology, because it's about creating a happier work environment for yourself. It's about, because you believe it. The reason Simon Sinek's why works is that it gives people purpose, and it gives people a reason to get out of bed and go to work in the morning or in the evening or whenever you go to work, right? So start with yourself and create a purpose for yourself in something that you believe in. And purpose is never money. If your purpose is just more money to buy the next jet ski or the next big car, or to just pay the mortgage, whatever, that's a consequence. That's the trick. You probably need to rethink it. Money will always come. What's your reason that makes you personally connect with the concept? You read the book, story of one of the most beautiful stories we came across was Karen Hester in Adams. Karen started from being the cleaning lady, right? So how many organizations you see where this chief operating officer, COO, used to be the cleaning lady? And that's Karen's story. So we've had Karen on various webinars. Karen and I have given talks together. One of the most inspiring chief operating officers I've ever worked with, right? So, but Karen has got it. She's got that why at purpose, and she believes in it personally.
Wow. And from there, that motivation will drive it through. Kevin,
Absolutely.
For listeners on this topic, would that be your 2-minute tip? Is there anything else that you'd say that with Lean and Green, you'd give a tip to the audience and listeners on this topic?
Absolutely. I agree. I think now I have to think about it, but as you've already given me a very important hint on it, I think make it a reason for yourself. Do yourself a favor. It's about believing in it personally and having a purpose, and makes your own personal life a bit more purposeful. It's something that you care about. And rest assured, others will also care about it. Others will see right through your passion and will believe in it and will join the journey with you. And of course, at the beginning, we will have a few small setbacks and ups and downs, such as life. But ultimately, look at all these other people who've managed to accomplish great feats. That's not even 2 minutes. That's probably 10 seconds, you feel like. Yeah. No. It starts with us, each one of us personally.
I can see that. The bigger purpose and the bigger drive to something like Lean and Green will help you through some of the tougher times, I'm sure. Having that bigger cause in that regard, especially when we all look at our kids or our nephews or our nieces or our grandkids, that there's not much more inspiring and motivating to do it than that, is there, in that regard? Keivan, what's been a recent insight that you've had? Like, you've helped us all throughout your writings and the time on our podcast and everything else you do with insights and knowledge, but what's been a recent insight that you've gained yourself that you didn't know before?
Oh, that's a tough one, because there is loads of new things I didn't know before every day, I have to say, Brad. That's a tough one. But I think more recently, I'm specifically trying to think about Lean and Green. And more recently, and actually it's recent, but it's also old. We see that organizations go from trade-off thinking between Lean and Green. So like Jim Womack was saying back in the day, that organizations have this mindset, and so long as you think there's a trade-off, so you think that if you become economically more prosperous, you are damaging the environment. Guess what? If you think like that, that becomes true. But organizations go from that trade-off thinking towards more synergistic thinking, that actually, you know what, I can create synergies, find synergies between these two. The obvious one is, if I reduce economic waste, very likely I'll reduce environmental waste. But more and more, going back to the symbiosis that you named, more and more organizations are finding the symbiotic relationship between the two. The fact that, as you said, Brad, the two are really the same thing. So I don't need to really think about the two separate things. And I think this is more recently becoming more and more obvious, that maybe this is generation X and Y retiring and millennials taking over. Organizations are seeing this. And very importantly, I think, is the finance sector. Finance sector is also bankers around the world, essentially. Finance sector is also coming to that realization. You think about it, rating agencies globally have a huge influence, S&P and Moody's of the world. And both of them, and Fitch, they have ESG ratings today. So it's assets are being rated on ESG scale as well as economic scale, issuers and issuances. And that finance sector, seeing the symbiotic relationship between the two, that is incredible, because then we have proof. And where money goes, hopefully the world goes. The only slight issue is that the pace is not fast enough.
Yeah, we need to up that pace. But it's really, in essence, there's nothing that should stop us upping that pace, because you've proven it time and time again with companies, and more companies are proving it time and time again, that there is that symbiotic relationship. I can do good for the planet, good for society, good for quality, good for safety, and get major outcomes economically. It's all connected at the hip. And also
Absolutely.
came from what you mentioned, things like engaging people, motivating people, strategic alignment, understanding process and getting process precise, and mapping process, and all the techniques we know. Yeah, they're the same across the board too, aren't they? It's not like there's
100%. They're all the same. You don't even need to invent a new toolkit for. It's all the same. Yeah,
and the tools are all there. It's interesting. I love the conversation that we've had talking about the motivational factor, but also that insight that your environmental, your business improvement, your quality, and even your safety teams, they're all on the same gig. The more we can bring them together and create a unified improvement approach to help us create a better world for our customers, our company, our planet, our people, boy, there's some gains there to get also.
And the regulators are also trying to achieve the same, governments and regulators. So, but I mean, I often get asked, what about God? So recently I was talking at a Norwegian regional agency, development agency conference. And I think the minister from the government was giving another talk. And I had to say, and obviously the minister was there, I said, look, you're very lucky in Nordic countries, you have very good governance. But it's not exactly the same. We have slightly dysfunctional governance today in other parts of the world, I have to say. And it's apparent, I'm not trying to make a political statement. It's just evident from what we see. But we don't have to wait for them. It is absolutely, this is the point. We certainly do not need to go and lobby the government or wait for just do it.
Yeah,
just enjoy doing it. I think that's the point.
And Keivan, you think of the governments too, they are driven by voters.
Yes.
And voters work for organizations.
Yes, exactly.
So for every organization that starts to shift its culture in this direction, get the outcomes for their customers, themselves, and the planet, at the same time influence culture of every employee, it's a chain reaction.
Absolutely. And guess what? UK government went to look at Marks and Spencer, what they're doing. Of course, when organizations lead it, governments follow. I guess your point is excellent, Brad. We shouldn't necessarily wait for the government to lead us. We can lead. It's like in an organization, as we just discussed, anywhere you are within the organizations, do it for your own sake, because you will enjoy your job a lot more and you will achieve a lot more, not because you're doing anyone a favor. It's for Keivan that Keivan is doing this, if you like. And it's the same. If you're an organization within a bigger system called the country, start doing it. You will enjoy lots of prosperity. And of course, the governments will gradually move as a result of that.
Yeah. Do it, celebrate it, show someone else, get them fired up, and it'll all keep snowballing.
Indeed.
Matt, I know there's so much more our listeners will want to learn and gain, and I know that you and colleagues around you can help so much on holistically if people need further help. How can people reach out to you, Keivan? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So I'll be very happy. I'm available via social media, Twitter and of course LinkedIn, and my email address we can share that. Would love to help anybody, any organization anywhere in the world who's going on a lean and green journey. By the way, just to mention that all of this is charitable. So all of my talks at conferences, all the book income and all the university research or lecture income that I might have, they all go to charities. It's the same for Peter Hines and Hunter Lovins, by the way, for my co-authors. So we would be only glad to help any organization, any agency who's going on this journey. It's really fulfilled and enriched our lives, and we're grateful for people's time. Eternally grateful. Yeah.
Well, Keivan, thank you, mate. You've really helped myself through my career, and a lot of my passion comes from the work that you and Peter have done and the books that you've written that I've read. And thank you for everything you'll do going forward. I know you're not letting up and that you're driven by your passion, and thank you.
But no, thank you, Brad. You've started this fantastic podcast, much needed, and now gone global, gone viral. And I'm really pleased to see it prospering like this. Thank you big times.
Thanks, Keivan. Really appreciate it. And I'll chat to you in the next episode when I'm sure there's going to be another topic that we've got to cover upcoming. Thanks, Keivan.
All the very best.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
What a great episode. Remember, you can go to our website, enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to get hold of a systems boundary map template you can use to understand your organization's current state environmentally. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. The win-win between economic, ethical, and environmental gains. For so long, perceptions have been that you can have environmental and social gains, but there's going to be an economic cost. Companies adopting a lean and green continuous improvement approach are proving there is a clear win-win outcome to be achieved between all these factors. My second key takeaway is the alignment between achieving environmental, safety, quality, and economic gains within an organisation. They are all achieved in the same way, a very similar approach. There is a massive potential if the people in these roles within organisations can align, unify their effort, and help their organisations achieve a culture of continuous improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Keivan. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.